Hello, welcome to Crypto News. Today is June 28th, 2025, and the top crypto news is as follows. And all I want to tell you is that I was planning on getting back from my trip on Thursday afternoon so I could do an episode, but I ended up in bed by 1 p.m. on Saturday. As you can imagine, I was very late on my trip. However, today I have gathered the most important news from the days I was away, and we will see it all in today's episode. And we will start with the Arizona House of Representatives, which passed a bill for its own Bitcoin reserve. The bill directs the first $300,000 of seized cryptocurrencies to the Attorney General, with the remaining funds being split between the state and the reserve. So the second Arizona bill is over, and we won't hear about Bitcoin reserve in the states for a long time, as you can see from the table. Continuing, we will also go to India, where specifically the national representative of the ruling party of India called on the country to consider the possibility of starting a pilot program to create a Bitcoin reserve. And beyond that, the man called for greater clarity on the taxation and regulation of cryptocurrencies in India. Moving on from India, which also wants to get very involved in cryptocurrencies, following America, we will go to the banks of South Korea, which are also planning their own stablecoin. Specifically, 8 major South Korean banks are working on the creation of a stablecoin backed by their own currency, with the aim of protecting the currency from the growing dominance of the US dollar. And as we say all this about stablecoins, and you know from Crypto News that stablecoins will be increasingly desirable by countries and companies, we will address the European Commission, which is downplaying the risks of stablecoins as it opposes the warning of the European Central Bank. In short, the ECB says that stablecoins are coming to destroy the banking system as it is and weaken it. However, the European Commission says that there is not that much risk, while the BIS, which is the Bank of Banks, the one that issues laws for banks and central banks, says that stablecoins have failed as money and is calling for stricter restrictions on their role. Let's now say at this point that one of the main priorities of a bank, and especially a central bank, is essentially the issuance and control of a currency, dollar, euro, and the rest. Now, as I said, that's the core of the products. That's what they're essentially doing. So if other stablecoins like Circle and Tether or other stablecoins from big companies like Amazon and so on start issuing their own stablecoins, that tends to take power away from central banks and generally from banks, and it will also take power away from the BIS. So that's something they don't like, and of course stablecoins have not failed in any way. More and more people are looking for them and more are being used, please. Moving on from the BIS, we'll move on to Barclays, which is essentially a UK-based bank which is going to start blocking cryptocurrency exchanges that are made through its own card, citing risks associated with the volatility of cryptocurrencies. So whoever has this bank here, be careful. Moving on, we're going to go to our ETFs, and we're basically in the green, and we've been in the green for 13 straight days. Despite all the problems with tariffs and the war between Israel and Iran, ETFs and big investors continue to invest more and more in Bitcoin. And let me also tell you that Invesco and Galaxy Digital have jointly filed for an ETF for Solana, please. So this ETF is the 9th in a row that's waiting for approval from the US Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. And let's say it's a spot ETF. Moving on, we're going to go to our companies that all want more Bitcoin and some are buying Ethereum, and we're going to start with Bitcoin Treasury Corporation, which we learned that first of all it's relisted on the Toronto Stock Exchange and bought 292 Bitcoin for $92 billion, while Sapling Gaming saw its stock rise 7% after purchasing $30 million worth of Ethereum. Moving on, we'll also go to Metaplanet, the Japanese MicroStrategy, which bought 1,234 BTC please in its last purchase. And since I've got the strategy in my mouth, let's look at the legal implications. Specifically, the strategy is now facing 5 lawsuits accusing it of securities fraud in relation to the BTC it holds. Specifically, each lawsuit accuses the strategy of misleading investors about the expected profit and risks of the Bitcoin market. These companies claim that MicroStrategy deceived investors by saying that it was very easy to make a profit and there was almost no risk. The companies claim that the fraud took place over a period of 11 months, between April 30th, 2024 and April 4th, 2025. So those are the legal differences of the strategy. Continuing, we will also go to our financial institutions, and we will go to Kraken, where Kraken now has a MyCA license in Ireland and is a 100% legal exchange in Europe, while Coinbase itself is seeing its shares go up a lot and have almost reached a new all-time high. Let's say that Coinbase stock closed at $375.07, while the all-time high was $377.39. So it was just before the all-time high. And for this very reason, ARK Investors continues to sell Coinbase shares and sold $12.5 million of the shares it held. So to wrap up for Coinbase, let me tell you that Coinbase has put Cardano and Litecoin versions in the form of wrapped coins on the base, which is its own level 2 in the form of Coinbase ADA and Coinbase Litecoin. So now the base also supports these two coins, and it's an interesting move in my opinion. Moving on to our financials, we'll also go to Gemini, which is launching strategy shares specifically for EU citizens. So now you can buy strategy shares in the form of tokens directly from Gemini. And as Gemini says, more stocks and ETFs will come in the form of tokens. So we're talking about tokenization, and if Gemini manages to bring ETFs to EU citizens, that's going to be very interesting. Because I don't know if you know, as Europeans in general, we're not allowed to invest in US ETFs due to legislation. So if they can do it legally with tokenization, that's going to open up a huge market. Moving on, we're going to go to our last exchange for today, and we're going to go to Bitvavo, which secured a MyCA license from the Netherlands. So we still have one legitimate exchange in Europe to choose from, and Bitvavo is one of the biggest. Moving on to our investments, we're also going to go to the SEC trial with Ripple, where the judge overseeing the trial rejected Ripple and the SEC's joint motion to reduce the $125 million fine. Essentially, Ripple and the SEC had agreed that Ripple would pay $50 million to the SEC and keep the other $75 million. But the US court disagrees, and for that very reason, and to avoid wasting more money and time, Ripple is withdrawing from the lawsuit. Specifically, the years-long legal battle between Ripple and the US Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, appears to have finally come to an end after Ripple Labs CEO Brad Garlinghouse announced on Friday that the company plans to withdraw its defense in the case. As a result, the case has ended after 5 years. Let's just say at this point that since Ripple essentially accepted the court's original ruling without filing any defense, Ripple will pay $125 million in addition and likely leave the company's legal insurance in place. However, that case is over, and as I said, to avoid wasting any more money and time, Ripple simply backed out. And let's just say I'll have Ripple's CEO statement in the description for you. Moving on, let me tell you something nice about Ripple. It's that Ripple is expanding into interoperability as it joins the wormhole. And it's not just the XRP ledger that's joining there. The XRPLEVM is also joining the wormhole, which is an interoperability project, which, as the name suggests, can now join over 30 blockchains, and Ripple is one of them. So it's time to go to our favorite cryptocurrency market, with Bitcoin sitting at $107,000. We're at our resistance and struggling to break it. Basically, Bitcoin is struggling to break it. And the last thing from the war is that, as we said in previous episodes, the war is essentially over. However, Iran seems to have escaped a missile into Israel. It didn't hit anything. Trump was trying to calm things down. And after a few days, we learned that Iran defeated America, as Iran's supreme religious leader declared that Iran essentially defeated America, and we are staying there. Now there is peace in what will probably go down in history as the 12-day war. That wraps up the top news for crypto today. Is June 28th, 2025. I'd like to remind you that the content you just watched is created for educational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice, but rather as investment opinion. Please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and feel free to comment. Take care, everyone, and have a good day.